And we're back. I'm Aaron. You're
I'm
Chris.
Chris.
Yep.
What is going on? And this is the Anything Podcast.
The Anything Podcast. Well, first of all, new from Mattel. It's My First Kill Barbie. New from Mattel. It's Leprosy Barbie. New from Mattel. It's Pussy Lips of All Shapes and Sizes Barbie. And new from Mattel, it's Rising from the Grave Barbie.
And wasn't there one more?
Yep, new from Mattel, it's an ether-soaked rag Barbie.
And for anybody who is not knowing what that is Cards Against Humanity. Aaron and I have met actually playing Cards Against Humanity via a mutual friend. And we started talking, and every time we played Cards Against Humanity, it was just this amazing, fun, great time with such good energy. But during the game, we'd always somehow get into some crazy conversations, whether it be aliens or whether it be crazy stuff going on. So you, Aaron, approached me and said, let's start a podcast.
Yes. Do you want to do a podcast? And then we met out for drinks somewhere. Where did we go? By the Galleria Mall. That was fun.
You sure? I thought it was
Talked
a place,
it over.
I thought it was a place on Sheridan, that Italian place.
Did we go there too? No, we went.
Yeah, it was the Italian place on Sheridan.
What's in the Galleria Mall by Wong Fu's over there? There's P.F. Chang's, right?
Yeah, but we didn't go to the mall, I don't think.
We weren't in the mall. There's a bar by the mall. Anyway, that was fun. We talked it over. We decided, and now we start at the bottom. Now we're here.
Yeah.
Yep, here we are.
So, yeah, we've actually started a podcast and been doing it for a little while, which is fun. And, we kept adding things and changing things and tweaking things and making sure they work properly. And, we've been doing it for a little while, which is good. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun. And we finally got back to cards, which is even better. So that was a lot of fun.
Cards Against Humanity might be the most fun that I have in my life.
Yeah. Oh, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, super fun.
So, yeah, we were back playing, and that was probably the most greatest cards that came up. Yeah. There was another good one, and that was the one I had as a Karzar. And then there was another one that came up that was really funny, too, that I had, which was like close to it, but not as good as that new from Mattel. It's Blink Barbie.
That was the best one for sure. First kill Barbie.
Oh yeah, that was hilarious. That was good.
Well, the other one that was funny that I remember is Viagra is a slippery slope that leads to penis breath. Okay.
Yeah, I won that too.
Yep.
That was a good one. That was funny.
So for listeners and viewers out there who have not played the magical game called Cards Against Humanity, get your friends, get some liquor, get Cards Against Humanity. It's a fun time.
Oh, yeah. But here's the thing. You don't even need to have liquor.
No, you don't.
Because you don't drink when we play. I don't drink when we play.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I'll have like water or something with me, but I don't have liquor because I'm the one who's driving home. So.
Well, part of the rules of Cards Against Humanity is that you're not allowed to drink any kind of beverages. So don't drink. Don't have any water.
That's bullshit.
Oh, okay.
And you know what? No, the only thing I pay attention to in the rule is who poops last.
Yeah, that's hilarious. That's how you start the game. The funniest thing. So always take a pregame dump before you go over there.
And then you'll be going. Yeah, and then you'll be the card czar like I am, because I'm the card czar usually most of the time. Yeah. Although I wasn't, because I was pretty busy that day. But I'm excited because it was a long stretch of time before we were playing. And so it was just really good to get back into it. And we're playing again in a couple of weeks, which is nice.
It'll be super fun.
I can't wait. Now, the only thing we got to do is we got to set up our setup at the place we play so we can have our cameras and all that fun stuff. But yeah, as I was saying when we first started, you had the idea that came and said, yeah, let's start a podcast. And I'm like, yeah, that'd be pretty fun. You know, you can just hang out, do whatever. And there's a lot of different things. And I don't really like focusing in on one topic. And I'm glad you didn't really want to either and just kind of cover anything.
Yeah.
Which is great because, I don't want to be bound to one certain subject. Like if you go to a podcast and it's talking about, just movies or just sports or just, you can cover a lot of shit there, but it's not going to be, we could talk about sports or we could talk about movies or we could talk about aliens or, crazy things and whatever. So I really liked it. And then, slowly but surely we started, they're like, all right, let's get a couple of mics. So we started doing a couple test runs. We were running on this little tiny table, which is like nothing like what we have set up now. And then it was just you and me kind of running through the ropes, figuring things out. Then I'm like, fuck it, I'm going to build a table. So I built this.
Yep.
We started setting it up to make it look more. We got more mics because we're going to have more guests. We just had our first guest on last week, which was really cool. And then, I start because I run a YouTube channel as well, and I want to get a better live stream feed for everything. So I've been researching that. And one of the things that we were talking about too was having multiple camera angles, which is great because now we have multiple camera angles that we're able to cycle through and be able to do different things. So it's pretty cool. We got a nice little setup. We're just really starting out. Got maybe about 12, 13 or so podcasts so far, which is really nice.
So what is your YouTube channel?
It's called Real Rideshare Stories.
All right.
And you can get on YouTube. And it's all about rideshare. It's about different tips and tricks for rideshare, being both a passenger and a driver. Crazy stories of what happened. I do collabs with other YouTube drivers, which I just had one on my channel the other day from Dustin from Dustin is Driving. Real good channel. He just hit 30,000 subs the other day, so congrats to him. When you hear this and watch this, he's going to be probably much more than that, but he's got a great channel. I was just on his actually probably about an hour before we started right now. It's a lot of fun. And then I actually show what happens on actual rideshare rides from dash cam footage and all that. And it's a great way to educate people and then also kind of just talk about what's going on in rideshare news.
Awesome. Well, since you are a rideshare person, you're part of the quote unquote gig economy, which I didn't know what that was until.
Yep.
Okay. So we were talking about California's gig worker law will mostly affect non-gig workers. That's on CBS News. Now the headline is California AB5 will have effects far beyond Uber. Okay. So now I'm not a driver. I'm not part of the gig economy. So tell me, what is AB5 and how is it affecting people?
All right. So I can talk a lot about this, and thankfully we don't have time limits. So we can cover a lot of it, and there's a lot to it. So first, AB5 was a bill that was brought up in the Assembly. That's why it's Assembly Bill 5. And it's called the Gig Workers Employment Bill, or term coined that way. And it was established and written by Lorena Gonzalez, who is based out of, I believe it's San Diego. And the whole point of AB5 is to reclassify independent contractors as employees if they pass a 3-part ABC test. And how it was introduced was there was a court case heard by the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court in California last year, which is called Diamond X. I think it's Diamond X or something close to it. And they hired people based on independent contractor status instead of employees. And they found that they had this ABC test and they didn't pass that test, so their independent contractors were technically supposed to be employees, and they were misclassified as that. So AB5 was introduced to have this codify for law versus tying it up in the court system for people who are misclassifying independent contractors as employees and trying to get the right benefits. So currently, up until just recently, they had to go to court. Now they're changing it. And the problem with AB5 is, yes, it passed to the Assembly in May, I believe. Then it crossed over to the Senate, as it has to. It's gone through different steps where they had to amend it, change it, exempt people and status in industries from it, because it was not going to affect just gig workers, but it was also going to affect doctors and lawyers and strippers and truckers.
Oh,
and
I see.
Anybody who is an independent contractor. So they exempted like people like realtors, and they exempted people like doctors and lawyers and all those people who are independent contractors, who could technically pass that test, but because the way everything's set up, it wouldn't. So right now, it just passed the Senate on the 11th, I believe it was, and their legislative session ended on the 12th. Or the 13th. So they did it like a last minute type thing. And so now it's going to the governor's desk to get signed. And the governor's kind of on the fence if he's going to sign it. And there's reasons for it. So if you want to dig a little deeper, Gavin Newsom, I think that's his name, but I know it's Gavin. He's the governor of California. And first, he was originally the mayor of San Francisco, where Silicon Valley is, and where these big giant tech companies are. So there's a lot of money and a lot of power when it comes to say in things. And we all know California likes to tax a lot of its things, just kind of like New York State and some other high-tax states. But with California, so he was the mayor, so he was all cuddled up with big billionaire business, including Uber and Lyft, because they were based out of San Francisco. And so once he's now governor, so they kind of have that ties. And if you want to play into a depth game versus the surface game, which a lot of people are, the depth game, he's expected to make a 2024 presidential run. So one of the things is, are you going to piss off your possible donors, Uber and Lyft? Or are you going to cut a deal with them saying, oh, yeah, we'll give some money towards your campaign and back you, but you have to exempt us, or so you can veto it or you can sign it. So he's in this fine line, because then if you want to look on the legislative side, they like taxes. They like collecting money. So the state will actually reclassify up to about 1 million people that are not necessarily drivers, but independent contractors to employees. So it can affect up to 1 million people. So they're expecting to get a tax revenue increase of anywhere from $7 to $9 billion with this piece of legislation.
All right. So when you're an independent contractor, you're responsible for paying taxes for yourself. You're responsible for keeping track of your income and then claiming that at the end of the year on taxes or in some kind of different structure. Whereas if you're an employee, the taxes come right out of your paycheck, and they have different rules on what your rights are as an employee with different benefits and different rules. So independent contractors don't have those same rights, benefits, requirements as an employer would have to give certain opportunities and rights to the employee, and also the tax structure is different. So once you delve into it, they're changing whether the Uber driver is an independent contractor to employee to make more money in taxes. That's what it boils down to, you think?
More than likely, that's what it seems like.
It's always about the money.
Yeah, if you follow the money trail, that's where it is. And then if you do research on Gonzalez and she's very closely tied to workers' unions and all that. And the workers' union is really hurting because unions aren't what they used to be. And, they're not necessarily for the little guy or for the worker. They do have some pull in certain things, so I'm not going to talk bad about them, but they're not necessarily in a good position right now. So one of the big things, too, is they're really backing this law or this bill and want it to become law, because now they have fresh new blood, which could sign up to become in the union. And the question comes is, are they really for the driver or are they really for themselves? And that's the big problem. It's you got to ask yourself that question. So it's this really weird thing because I see it as a money grab. And I think that's where it is. I think they're trying to get $7 to $9 billion in additional tax revenue because if you follow the money, that's where it is.
Okay. So what benefits, if you're categorized as an employee, what benefits do you now have?
I mean,
how does things change for you if you're an employee rather than an independent contractor?
Well, I couldn't tell you in terms of the actual specifics. So Uber and Lyft have come out in California and said different things. Uber came out and said they're not going to comply. They're not going to. They're not planning on changing anything because they don't believe that drivers are at its core, and so they're trying to poke a hole in that ABC test. They're technically Uber and Lyft are a lead generator for to connect drivers and riders,
right?
And then they collect compensation on top of that,
right?
Over time, though, so if you want to, I guess let's go back real quick first, the history with Uber and Lyft. So Uber and Lyft, I mean, they started off differently and evolved into what they are now. And if you go back a couple of years ago, drivers used to get 80%, Uber and Lyft used to get 20%. So it was an 80-20 split. So drivers made most of the money. Everybody was pretty happy. There was, when you signed up, you knew you were an independent contractor. You knew you weren't entitled to benefits. You knew these types of things. But the thing was, it was such an easy way to make money, and it was such an easy way to go out whenever you wanted because it is so flexible. I could go on, right after we finish this podcast, go out for a couple hours, make a few bucks, and then come home. Or I could go out, take a couple of rides, like say I drop my kid off at school before I got to go to work. I can take that time and go out and take a couple of rides and make a few bucks that way. So when the flexibility is great, the money was great. And then all of a sudden they started changing things. So they did this thing called upfront pricing. And so it would show what the pricing would be. And then they changed the pay structure to mileage and time and a base fare. So when you accepted a ride and started a ride, you get this base fare rate. Then you would get mileage and time on top of that. So however long the ride was and however far, and these mileage rates. And they've continued to cut mileage rates down to where it's just over the IRS mileage limit. So a lot of people, if they're not playing their cards right and they don't know what they're doing, you're poised to actually lose money while you're driving. Even though it looks like you're making money, you're really actually losing money when you take into account gas, other expenses, putting money away for your car, depreciation, loan interest, whatever it could be. There's a lot of things going on with that. So there's issues there. So over time, when they started changing these things and taking away driver pay, like I want to say it was probably like $2.25 a mile or so that you'd make before, which that was great money. I mean, you'd go out, you could make $100, not taking too many rides, and you'd be paid pretty well. Then they started seeing that all these people wanted to sign up and drive, and they started treating drivers as commodity versus maybe the backbone of their business, and trying to take care of drivers to make them happy. And then the drivers would say, yeah, use the service, it's good, and all this. And there's been a lot of issues within Uber and Lyft itself, mostly Uber when it comes to how they trust the company, the executives, and all that stuff. There's been a lot of issues there. But that's employment side. That's not really what it is. But so they continued to slash prices and slash rates, and then they changed things to cut people's pay down and down and down to the point where now drivers are scrounging to make money more so. I mean, you still can make money out there. I wouldn't be doing it if I wasn't making money. But I also am smart, and I know my market. I know when to go out. I know what to do. I know where to go. So I can make a good chunk of change, because I know the events, blah, 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 all that good stuff. But a lot of drivers aren't necessarily, using common sense in a lot of cases. And so now what's happening is their pay has gone down over time instead of either staying the same or even increasing due to inflation. So it's one of the only business models that has shrunken its payout over time because they need to get more money. And it's also a very interesting time when this bill even went into place because earlier this year, I believe it was just at the end of last year. So it was in December when Lyft filed for their IPO, and it takes a little bit of time for everything to go, but they made the filement for it, and then they beat Uber to it by about a month or two. And so Lyft went public first, Uber went public, and it was, I believe Uber went public at the beginning of the beginning of April. And the exact date escapes me, but those two dates when they went public, those companies made billions. They became $1 billion company because of all the investment. So there are now these huge companies, and there were a lot of strikes going on, driver strikes in California because of the pay cuts and because of this. So they wanted to voice their opposition and saying, look, you need to change what you're doing because drivers are getting pissed off. They're the backbone. If they don't if every driver shut their app off, Uber and Lyft don't make money. Lyft especially doesn't make money because they're a one-trick pony. Uber, on the other side, could make money on Uber Eats, but again, you need drivers to do that. They shut if they shut it off, nothing. But you could get Uber Scooter, you could get Uber Freight. They're trying to expand beyond just being transportation and using the different service that way. So they could still make a little bit of money if everybody shut off, but they'd be devastated. Most of their money would be dried up. So, they really need to take into account that drivers are a main point, and they need to stop being greedy because last year the CEO got a $45 million bonus or something crazy like that. Somebody just bought a $45 million house and like multi-million dollar places, and they just pledged $30 million each, both Uber and Lyft, to fight AB5. And if it passes that and they're not exempt, they're going to do a 2020 ballot measure to make a new classification. So it's not independent contractor and it's not employee, but a new on-demand worker classification that they would fall under, and then bypass AB5 altogether and kind of come up with their own thing. So they've said, we'll put in a minimum wage, we'll put in benefits, we'll put in this, that, and the other thing. And that's what a lot of drivers are upset about because they're not getting benefits, but they signed up that way. Right. And being a gig economy, what do you think when you hear gig economy or gig worker?
Well, I just thought of, for me, being a layman, I just thought like a gig is a gigabyte to me. So
okay,
yeah,
so you're thinking
what it was.
You're thinking computer terms,
exactly.
When in fact it's actually think side gig,
right?
Or think,
and that makes sense now that I reterm it in my head. It's a side gig economy.
Yep.
Which but it's not. Uber is not a side gig for a lot of people. Also,
Well, that's not true. So Uber and Lyft, there are a lot of people who are doing it full time, yes. But if you look into the statistics, I believe it's 90% of drivers work less than, no, I'm sorry, I think it's 80% of drivers work less than 10 hours. And then I think it's 90.2% or something like that work less than 20 hours. So most drivers are just doing it maybe on the weekend or just doing it here or there. They're not working a lot.
Are the numbers skewed because it takes into account people who just signed up for it and are like, maybe I'll do this, but they're on the outskirts of...
No, I believe it's actually done through active accounts. Okay. So they'll probably have a cutoff point saying if you haven't driven in like 2 months,
right,
you could go. If you signed up and you were driving and then stopped driving for 2 months, they might say, "Oh, you're not an active user anymore," but they're going to still consider it. So, but yeah, for the vast majority of people, it is part-time.
Sure. Yeah.
And I've created polls on my channel, and I've had other people like other channels. So like Dustin is Driving, Rideshare Professor, Rideshare Hub, all these different channels, they have put out polls too. And a lot of drivers are not in favor of AB5. One, because simply they don't know what it's going to do to them.
Right.
They don't think it's going to benefit them. And then, so I said Uber said they're not going to comply with the law. They're saying that drivers are not the core of it. Lyft took a different stance, and they sent out emails that said you might have to work specific shifts in specific areas, and you can't work more than one platform. You might be limited to either just Lyft or just Uber or just
Right.
DoorDash
See,
or
that
whatever it
doesn't
might
sound
be.
good at all. And also, it's probably a bigger chunk of money that you're getting taxed on. Well, like you're going to make less money in your pocket because you're going to pay higher taxes.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, it's, so what benefits does working for an employer? We have certain rights, but if you're an independent contractor, you don't get those same rights, but also you're probably taking home more money. If you work for an employer and they have maybe medical coverage or something, you still have to pay into it. It's a group policy. Whereas being an independent contractor, you don't have that option of paying into the employer insurance, which our medical coverage in our country is so messed up in the first place. So, why we need to get to a point where we have medical coverage for everybody. I shouldn't have to afford it. We spoke about this on the previous podcast, but other than that, is the tax rate going to be different for people? Are they going to take home less money with this new?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay. Because, so I've been an independent contractor for many years now. I haven't been a W-2 employee in a long, long time. And depending on how much money you make, so there's different tax brackets, which I'm sure you've heard of and you're familiar with. So if you make, let's say, $78,000 a year, you might be in this certain tax bracket, or you might hear things, which sure, it is a little bit, but it's not right exactly. So how it works is every single person, whether you make $4 an hour, whether you make $15 an hour, whether you make $500 an hour, everybody starts off on 1/1 at 12:01 a.m. Everybody who starts off on the first of the year, they all start at zero, and then as you work, you collect. So, for the first $12,000, you're in maybe one tax bracket.
Right.
Then once you hit that point, wherever it is in the calendar year for you, then you go transfer into the next tax bracket, and your money gets taxed differently once you hit that. And then it's once you hit these like points. So yeah, the tax brackets are going to be more. Usually it's like 30+%. And you can't deduct things. There's certain things you can deduct if you do an itemized return, but a lot of people just do like 1040 EZ and just do simple things.
Like theoretically, you could deduct tax on gas for mileage while you're driving.
Yeah, I mean, there's different things absolutely you can deduct. And I'm not a tax professional. I just want to say this right off the bat. So I am not a tax professional. Do not quote me 100% on anything. I'm just giving you what I know. If you want to talk about taxes, talk to a CPA who's trained, who knows what they're talking about, and they know the law, because even different states have different state laws when it comes to taxes and all that good stuff. And then they're just going to know much better. So take them with a grain of salt for anybody who is listening, or take what I say with a grain of salt for anybody. Just go to a tax preparer if you have any questions. I'm not a tax preparer. I don't want to. Got to make that quick disclaimer. But yeah, when you're an independent contractor, any expense can become a write-off. So the mileage you drive, if you go out and get water, if you go out and get food while you're driving, whatever it might be, you can take percentages of that and deduct it. I can take my cell phone bill, my cell phone, because most of that's used. I can do depreciation. I can do, any expense in my car. So if I buy neon lights for my car to give better ambiance, and try to get more tips or something, all that can be a business write-off and expense write-off. So, you can essentially bring your tax, what you owe, down a substantial amount versus what a employee has.
Right.
Because employees can't really do that.
Right,
Like
no.
I said, they can do certain itemized things, but there's a lot less that you can deduct.
Yes.
When it comes to benefits, you don't get benefits. As an independent contractor, that means you are your own business owner.
Right.
So you are your own boss. The problem with Uber and Lyft is, though, they create terms of service that you have to you're obliged to accept. And if you don't accept them, you can't drive.
Right.
But if you do accept them and continue to drive, you accept them even if, you say you signed up. I signed up for Uber 4 years ago. So I was getting that good rate back then. And then all of a sudden, like I said, they switch it. And to continue driving, you have to technically accept the new terms, which means, oh, we're cutting pay, or oh, we're changing search, or oh, we're doing this, oh, we're doing that. So a true independent contractor owns or has much more say in what they do. So they can, think of, let's just pretend a driver was a true, real independent contractor and not being exploited. They would be able to set their own rates. They would be able to set their time. They would be able to accept or deny ride without any consequence. They would, they would be able to do a lot of different things that you aren't able to do when it comes to Uber and Lyft to begin with. So yes, you can sign on and off when you want. Yes, you can choose to accept a ride without consequence. But if you don't accept rides, you might get a nasty text or a nasty email saying, "We've noticed that you haven't accepted rides. If you don't want to be online, turn it off and allow others so it can speed up the process for other people." And it's like, well, if you send me the same ride that is 42 minutes away of pickup, I'm not going 42 minutes to go 6 minutes down the road. It's just not happening. It's stupid. So if you do that, and then they could resend the ride. So if you cancel it, and they might send it a second or third time, so right there it would be 3 denials.
Right.
And so now they also have things in place that says, oh, if you keep a 90% acceptance rate, so that means 9 out of 10 rides that you take, you have to accept to be able to see how long the ride might be in the direction it's going. So it might say 6 minutes away, but then it'll say like 12 minutes south. And so you don't really know where you're going, but you can kind of so that you have to keep a 90% rate on Lyft to do that, and an 85% rate on Uber to do what's termed Uber Pro, which gives you these special treatment things. And same thing with being able to know where the ride and how long it's going to be. So they take away certain things as what an independent contractor really is.
Right.
And they don't allow for certain things. So, especially when it comes to rates, they one-sidedly make what the rates are.
Right.
And that's where a lot of the problem is. Yeah, you were right when you say independent contractors should be paid more, and usually are paid more, because then they have to fend for themselves for certain things, whether it's benefits, or if they want to go on vacation or take time off or whatever. If they're not working, they're not getting paid.
Well, the tax rate is different because they have the more expenses than employer. That's the difference.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I'm not a tax. I'm a layman completely when it comes to this stuff, but that's what I would assume that it would be.
Well, yeah, it's at a lower tax rate because you're able. It's business expenses because you are your own business.
Yeah.
So you get to claim the same type of tax benefits as other companies like Walmart, Amazon, Target, these big Apple, these big giant companies. You can claim the same benefits because technically you are your own. The difference then is just if you're an LLC, or if you're a sole proprietor, or if you're DBA, it can affect differently. So LLC, you can claim a lot more. As a person, you can claim a certain amount, and then at a certain point it can cut off. And then, again, that's going to vary depending on where you are and what's going on. But yeah, when it comes to being an independent contractor, you usually should be having a lot more say in what you're doing. So that's where a lot of people are having problems. Then couple that with the pay cuts and the problems, and the ability where now, most drivers can't afford to get insurance or can't afford to do this or that or take time off because they're not getting the same pay that they were getting. It's like 4 times less in some instances than what it used to be years ago. And that's where the problem is. Like I said, I still make money where I'm at right now, so I'm not going to complain. But if they cut it anymore, it's not worth it, because now you're getting closer to that point where the amount of expenses that you're taking on is equaling to what you're making.
Right.
And a lot of people are taking negative rides, which mean they're actually losing money on the ride because they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So that's where the real problem is. If Uber and Lyft kept that aspect in that way, you wouldn't have these people striking and saying all this crap. And that the biggest problem is, one of the things that they showed the sign was, it said driver may, or it said something like ride cost $60, driver makes $3, and that's a gross overstatement of the reality of the situation. On average, they're supposed to be taking around 20 to 30%. I've seen them take more. I've seen them take 50 or so percent, or even more. But I've also seen them take a hit.
Yeah.
So I've seen them where the driver gets paid, close to $20, and the rider only paid like $8 or $9. Okay. So Uber and Lyft have to cover that. So I've seen it where, it's this fluctuation where they're getting this average. It's about 20, 30% or so. But the problem is that they're trying to get greedy and be profitable, and yet the way their business model is, it's really a problem.
Right.
Because you have to pay your drivers a certain amount. You can't, because otherwise they won't drive. So if anything gets cut more, you're going to have a lot of drivers who are going to say fuck you.
Yeah.
And if you raise rates, they're going to say, oh well, they'll go with a different company.
Right.
But if you look at New York City is a whole different beast. So they implemented a mandatory minimum wage a few months ago. They're not considered employees, but they mandated a minimum wage. So they had to raise rates. And so they kind of got out of this price lock where they were, because, Uber and Lyft are direct competitors. So they're trying to undercut each other as far as they can go, and that's what's causing this crappy way. But essentially they just have to raise rates. They have to spend their money wiser on their employees and who they have. And one of the craziest thing too was Uber just spent $500 million, $500 million on PR to the consumer to try to change their from a negative stance to a more positive stance. And it was like a huge flop. Well, they just spent $500 million trying to rebrand themselves because of what had happened in previous years. And it's a real problem.
Well, I mean, the bottom line is you have to pay your employees. I think one of the biggest problems in the world today, of course, is greed. So, I mean, everyone wants to be a glamorous gazillionaire, but in reality, you have to pay people for the work that they do. And that's how a society functions, is that is fair trade. We're supposed, if I grow oranges, I'm supposed to trade with someone who grows blueberries. We're supposed to get an equal amount. That's how societies function. When someone is taking all of the fruits and labors of an entire class full of people for themselves, then you get what we're seeing in the world today, which is horrible, and there's probably not a way to fix it. You're not going to, magically fix human greed. I mean, you can try to belay it by employing a lot of rules and structure to it. And there's a lot of people, oh, I don't want big government, I don't want this. Well, that might not be the solution, but specific rules and just basic math, pay your employees properly. And, these CEOs shouldn't be able to make oodles more money than your employees who are the core of your business. You're
Yep.
right. The drivers are the core of your business. The industry that I'm in, the people are the core of the business. And then the head honchos are just taking all of our fruits and labor to benefit themselves. And that's not the way a society is supposed to work.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. Like originally they started off really well.
Right.
And so drivers, they're like, you're lining up to make money, and
everyone's
you're
happy.
You're happy, and
Right.
you understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And it was common knowledge and common practice that they're like, oh yeah, they don't make benefits. But that's also the same thing too. Before it was a side gig. It was a gig. It wasn't meant to be full time.
Right.
And the thing is, a lot of people, because of whatever reason, they're using it as more a full-time income where they're working not 40 hours. They might be doing 50, 60, 70 hours worth to try to make $1,000 or $2,000 a week, whatever it might be. And that's very possible in whatever market you're in. But I mean, to me, you're working 50, 60, 70 hours. That's a lot of freaking hustling. And that's a lot of wear and tear on your car. That's a lot of depreciation. That's a lot right there.
Well, and then to have someone come in and say, you know what, we were taking this much of your work. Now we're taking much more of your work. Well, that's a complete imbalance. And then that's what
And,
is a big problem.
and the biggest problem is it's like Oliver. It's like, please, sir, can I have some more?
Yeah.
But, you can't start off people by saying, like, giving them like the riches and then I mean, nobody, let's face it, nobody got rich doing it. You couldn't make a shit ton of money. You could make $100,000. There were people that were making $100,000.
That's good.
And they were hustling their asses off. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But you can't give them full platters of
Right.
amazing food and then be like, and then each meal, you give them the same thing, and they're like, oh, I can eat all this, and then all of a sudden they start cutting back, and they're like, you know what? We're gonna cut this out, and then we're gonna cut this out, and you're like, wait, what? And then all of a sudden you're starting to get back down to scraps where, you're feeling full, and it's gonna fill you up, but there's a lot less to choose from. There's a lot more table showing than meal before.
Also, they're not even giving them the platter of food. They're giving them the ingredients. The people are making the food, and then they're taking away more and more of that food that the people are making. I mean, they give them a platform, but in the end, at the end of the day, the people who are doing the driving, they're paying for their car, they're paying for the car insurance, they're paying for repairs. They're picking up the people and making sure that they provide a great experience. They're doing everything. And the app on the phone, the back end, that does need to be taken care of and things. And it is a great way to link people together. It's a great idea, but the drivers are doing the lion's share of the work.
Oh yeah.
So it's like, and then you're taking away more and more and more of that labor that they're doing for yourself. That's just the greed factor. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like that in every
So
industry.
yeah, Uber and Lyft. I mean, they absolutely have a greed factor for sure.
And every company does.
And every company does. But so here's another issue with Uber and Lyft, and we're really peeling back the layers on just AB5. We're setting everything up because one of the problems is we can talk about it on the channel, and I've talked about it but you can only convey the message so long and so much before people just don't understand it. So I'm glad we have this medium where we can talk a little bit more about it. But going back with where was I? Oh shit, I got sidetracked with myself, and then I was gonna talk about not the drivers. What was I starting to say? You remember?
No, you didn't lead in far enough for me to be able to be like, oh, but so here's the calling people employees, that's going to have a big impact. So, I mean, you'd really have to weigh the benefits, and it seems at the end of the day that's just a way to.
The greed factor.
Yeah. That's
what I was talking about. So the greed factor, they did definitely do the greed factor, and they do cut things back, and they do expect them to pay, which there's no reimbursement there. So if you can keep cutting things back to that point, So yeah, drivers are getting pissed off at that and upset. So that's really where it is. They're talking about money. They don't really give a shit about some give a shit about benefits, but essentially it's really about money. And if they were paid enough to be able to go and, get the insurance or do this or do that, then they would be okay. But first off, side note, yeah, insurance should be just a basic right. I do believe that. My views are much different than saying, like social style. But when it comes to healthcare, everybody should be covered. We have the ability to cover people, especially when they need it, because you don't know when you're going to need it and all that. Right. So not everybody's going to go and use the system. I have insurance and I haven't really used it ever. So
no, it's there for when you need it. And it's the craziest thing. Like, again, we have police officers, we have firefighters, we have a ton of programs for social work, for all sorts of things, but we can't do healthcare, like the most important thing.
Yeah, so you want to have people healthy, and that's kind of the whole point. Yeah. But so the problem with Uber and Lyft is those things. But then, drivers, they need to realize again that this was a side gig thing, but I understand where it evolved out of something what they knew. But another big thing too is they need to know how to spend their money properly. So you need to, Uber just laid off 400 employees this past week. And then a couple of weeks ago, they laid off another 400 plus employees. So the thing is they grew too big too quick and didn't know how to handle it or delegate. They're just like, oh, let's hire. Which could sound good for investment or paper or whatever. It's like, oh, we had to hire X amount of people and go from there. Oh, sorry about that. And yeah, we had to go from there and all that fun stuff. But they just need to be smart how they spend their money. But you can't have that huge. It's like an inverse iceberg. Most of the iceberg on an actual iceberg is under what you see. You only see 10% and 90% is under the water. This is like a reverse iceberg where it's showing like 10% is for the workers and the drivers, and then 90% is for the execs. Right. And that's not how it really should be. It should be the other way around.
Well, that's the problem with every company in existence right now. We've gotten away from fair trade and equal work for equal pay, and somehow it's gotten some weird upside down pyramid, exactly what you're talking about, where the head people are just, a friend of mine said it's slavery with more steps, right? Which is the funniest thing I've ever heard, which it really is. It really, really is. If you have groups and groups of people working and you're taking all of their labor from them, that's slavery with more steps. That's the funniest thing. But that's really what's happening. We're in a society like everyone should contribute and things should be relatively equal so that we can all benefit. It raises, it uplifts everybody. So I don't know. There's a lot of things that are really lopsided and skewed, and it seems like, corporate greed is just out of control. It's ridiculous, and it happens everywhere.
Absolutely.
Ruining everything. Yeah, but who knows?
Yeah, so then going back to the actual law, like I said, once their IPOs went live in April, this legislation starts gaining steam. I believe it was actually introduced earlier than that, but I don't think it was... hold on, let me actually look that up. I can't, because Bill Tracker is an amazing thing. So AB5 Bill Tracker, ba-boom. And it'll actually show me when it was introduced. And I think it was actually introduced earlier. So, hold on. Whoop. Should show me the date. Hold on.
Well, when we were playing...
yeah. So, sorry. It was 12/3/18 when it was read first time into print. But it didn't pass, really, until May and switch over. So... whether it's actually for the drivers or not, I don't really think so, because it's not, you can't, Uber and Lyft are right when they say gig economy is a different type of worker. It's an on-demand worker.
Right.
It's a side gig. It's unique in itself. So I agree 100% with them. It very much is, especially the fact that I can do competition. So I can drive Uber and Lyft at the same time, and I do, because then I can make more money. I can take more rides. Because if Uber slows down and a ride comes in for Lyft, or it gets busy or whatever it might be, then I'm maximizing my earning potential.
Right.
And the problem is with this law, they're not taking into account most of the drivers that use the flexibility. You know, if you do DoorDash or Instacart, you have a chunk of time that you have to work. So you can kind of set your schedule. So it's like a 4-hour chunk maybe.
Yeah.
So you could say, I want to work 6 to 10 or, 2 to 6 or whatever it might be. And you can do that and kind of create your own schedule and make your own block. But with driving, you can go on and off whenever you choose. Right. I could go on for 5-10 minutes. Yeah. I could go on for 12 hours. Yeah. Whatever the max might be, because there's maximum, because people got to sleep.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, let's be real. You got to sleep. So, it was AB5 is good for one thing, and that's the fact that it put pressure on Uber and Lyft itself to say, you can't do that anymore. But if it was,
what can't they do? What did it put pressure?
Take people's away from them, take pay away from them, and continue trying to exploit them. Right. Because, like I said, they're just over. Some places are just over the minimum rate for the IRS.
Gotcha.
And other places are actually cut in half. So they're like 33, 42 cents a mile, because they changed the structure of how they pay. So instead of getting paid for the pickup to the drop off, they're actually getting paid from the accept to the drop off.
Right.
So I mean, is that a pay cut? Partially and partially not. It just depends on how the ride comes in and what that is. But it split it. So now, but that's one of the things that people don't take into account is the fact, I'm making 67 cents a mile, but you're only making 67 cents a mile when you have somebody in the car. Mm-hmm. You're not making 67 cents on the mile when you're driving to the location. Right. And if you're driving around waiting for a ride, like a lot of drivers might, then you're putting more miles on your car,
right, and
you're not being smart. Like if you just pulled over and waited because a ride is going to come in, unless you're in like the ghetto and you don't want to be there,
yeah, of course,
or you don't want to be in a rural area because chances are you're not going to get rides just because of being out there. Yeah. So if you want to be in a more situated area that's going to benefit you, you might have to drive there. So you're going to put dead miles on. Mm-hmm. Now, is dead miles a good thing? Well, it could be, because it's still a business expense, because you're driving for Uber and Lyft waiting for a ride. So, that's like kind of the workaround. But is it worth it? No, because you're putting a shit ton of depreciation on your car with the mileage. That means you're going to have to change your oil. That means you're going to have to change your tires. You're going to have to do all of this stuff. And people don't take into account that at all. Yeah. And so they're just not smart about it. But when it comes to AB5, it's like you're taking this brand new type of work and slapping a century-old way of doing things onto it, saying you're an employee. Is that really the right way to go? Right. Or should they actually sit down and say, this is a new style of doing something that we're not sure how to classify, because you're not really an independent contractor, but you're not really an employee. So let's sit down. What benefits the driver the most? And then what is good for the company for the longevity, so the drivers can continue driving, the passengers can continue passenging, and then the legislator's happy because they're actually looking out for the people instead of looking out for the pocketbooks or the taxes or whatever they might be doing. And so, like I said, you're gaining $7 to $9 billion, And like you said at the beginning, it's not just gig workers. It's going to take into account hairdressers. It's going to take into account strippers. It's going to take into account truckers. It's going to take into account anybody who's not exempt from that would pass the ABC test.
Right.
So it has much more implication than they thought. So they had to do exemptions for doctors, lawyers, realtors, and these other.
Why should they get it? That's the whole thing. Why should they get exceptions and exemptions?
Well, they're also getting paid a lot better. So like a doctor and a lawyer, and that, they're not getting exploited. So plus there's a lot of money behind doctors, lawyers, realtors, and all this stuff. But the craziest thing in this whole thing is that drivers have no say on either end. So AB5 is done by legislators. Uber and Lyft are coming up with their own ideas or their own thoughts and saying, oh, this is what's best for drivers. Oh, no, this is what's best for drivers. But really, there's no drivers that are actually able to speak and able to be at the forefront and say, look, this is what's best for drivers. You're a company who wants to maximize your profits. You really don't have our best interests at heart. You are just looking at taxes, so get the fuck out of here and let's come up with something together where it's everybody's going to win, but mostly it's the drivers because it's going to be the real betterment. And that's where we really need to step up as drivers.
For sure.
And you can unite. You can't do it in a union style, but as I said earlier, do unions really have your best interest at heart? And the answer in this case is no, they don't. They're hurting for people because of their tarnished way.
Well, the reason for the union is exactly what you just said. It's the people to represent, but they don't. Everything's become so skewed and so off base, and I think that we've lost sight of like we're all live in the same country. We're all part of the same thing, so we should all be for each other's betterment.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And then the reason we have like these special interests, and these people are out for the company, and these people are out for taxes for it doesn't help anyone, because we're all part of a society that we're supposed to be making decisions to better everybody and elevate everyone. It's the craziest thing.
Oh yeah, exactly.
We good over there? No?
Yeah. Right, okay. So yeah, it's just this weird thing. So I mean, like, it's crazy because, like I said, I'm on YouTube, so I reach quite a few different people, and I've talked about it with other drivers who are also YouTubers and do YouTube style driving related material. And most of the people that we talk to, they aren't in favor of it. They don't understand it, and they're not sure what's going to happen. And that's part of the case too, because you don't know what it's going to look like. Lyft came out and said one thing, Uber came out and said another thing. Nobody knows what's actually going to happen. Nobody knows if you can really work shifts or not. But look at any other employee to employer relationship. I don't know any employer says, yeah, you can work for another company that's our direct competition. Go ahead, you can. It just doesn't make sense. So, if you were really, really looking out for the driver, you would instate a mandatory minimum wage, just like New York City did. New York City put in a mandatory minimum wage, and it worked. It's working. I really haven't heard much from drivers in terms of how they're doing in that, but it's working.
Right.
So it's not like it's not. And there's still people taking rides. It's become so ingrained in society. There's so many people who are taking rides because they go out drinking and they don't want to drive, which is one of the best features of it. Mm-hmm. Then there's elderly who may not be able to drive anymore, and they can go to their doctor's appointments. They can go to the grocery store. They can still keep their independence where they're not relying on their family or friends to take them somewhere. Same thing for people who, got DWIs to begin with, and their license is suspended, so they can get to and from work. Yep. There's other people who can't afford vehicles, or, something broke down and they can't rely on other people. So it's become so ingrained and instilled. Plus, even when you travel, if you don't want to rent a car, you don't have to.
Yep. There's a dude at my work who takes the Uber literally 2 blocks because he didn't want to walk. Ubers from like you live 2 blocks away and you Uber to work.
Yeah, you get that. Yeah, you get that sometimes too, where
okay.
people do that, and it's just like, holy crap.
Or I am a friend of mine at work. She was showing me a video of a dude who's his sister is confronting him because he spent $1,200 on the credit card for Pokemon, for buying Pokemon things off Amazon,
God.
right? But the funniest thing about it was he goes, well, what is this Uber charge? And he goes, well, I had to go catch the Pokemon. So he was taking an Uber, having the Uber drive him around to the Pokestops to catch the Pokies. It's a really, I don't know if it's fake or it's a funny video, but
I wouldn't, you know what? I wouldn't doubt it, because some of the things that I've heard and seen, I mean, people will order Ubers or Lyfts to move stuff because they're moving apartments or, you know, they're going to and from school in terms of like dorm move-ins and stuff. And then, you know, I've seen people who order XLs because they bought a TV and it's too big for their car.
Yeah.
So they're having that go to like deliver to their house. I've seen drivers get rides that aren't going anywhere, but the person's car broke down and they want to jump, which is not what the service is for.
Yeah.
And I would tell that person to go fuck themselves and then wait the few minutes. I would literally sit there, wait the couple of minutes that you have to wait, because you got to wait 5 minutes before you can cancel the ride to collect the no-show fee. Yeah. And then I would report them on top of that too. Of course,
for sure.
And they can't, and the best thing, I mean, they could cancel if they want. That's fine. I'll still get the cancel fee, but you'd immediately get reported on.
Sure. Well, what the best thing to do is, if you need a ride, is to go to the pizza shop, order a pizza, order it for delivery. Then give them your address. Then when they go to deliver it, just be like, hey, can I get a ride with you? And have them deliver you to your house. See, nobody knows that.
The funny thing is, there's actually a meme that says that exact thing, and I posted that on my community tab, because I always post like little memes on my community tab with like Uber and Lyft. That's some funny shit. But so now my question to you is, I kind of filled you in on a lot. It might be a little biased here and there.
I don't see
because
where.
I think you could probably figure out my thought. I never really said what my thoughts on AB5 were, did I?
I don't think so. Well, I mean, we've deduced that it's just about tax revenue, right?
Okay.
Which everything.
So
is.
I kind of kept it as unbiased as I possibly could.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, would you, if you were a driver, or even somebody on the outside looking in, do you think that this is a bill that's for drivers? Do you think this is a money grab? Do you think this is good for the Uber and Lyft? What's your take on it? Just maybe what you read, and then what we've just discussed now.
Well, I haven't read anything about it. So, and having absolutely done zero research, but if history is any guide, it's always about the dollars for the state. So anytime that there's some kind of legislation that's trying to be made, it's always about tax revenue for the state. So without researching, I would assume that that's what they're trying to do, is say, okay, here's an opportunity for us to get more money from people. That's all everything always boils down to in my mind. So I will do some research and we can talk about it next time to see what the ins and outs are. But I'm assuming that they're just able to tax people at a higher rate if they switch them over to this, quote, employees. I'm assuming that they're able to get more money from them.
What we had actually discussed and talked about, what do you think is...
It sounds like a money grab. It doesn't sound like they have the driver's best interest in mind. Just as a layman, though. So,
okay. Yeah. And so my thoughts on it are the exact same thing. And I've dived into it quite deep. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of drivers out there who like it. There's a lot of drivers out there who hate it. But the thing is, every person that's in favor of it, when they make stupid comments, they're like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You're an Uber Lyft shill. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're right. All right. So are you, because Uber and Lyft is paying you because you're driving. Nice try.
Speaking of which, let's here's what, because the vaping thing is really bothering me. So let's talk about the vaping. You want to talk about the vaping?
Sure.
Okay. So first of all, I went to the dentist to get my teethies fixed and everything's fine and everything's good. No, I don't need dentures yet.
And well, that's a good thing.
Yeah. While I was in the chair, they ask you a bunch of questions, and I said that I have vaped, and I quit vaping about 5 or 6 months ago, and we still don't know.
Congratulations, by the way.
It's awesome. I don't know. We still don't know what the future, consequences of vaping may be. Who knows? But I can tell you that for me personally, I smoked a pack of cigarettes a day. It was a horrible addiction. And again, about the money, people decided that they could exploit my addiction and charge ridiculous taxes that are more ridiculous than anything else, exploiting addiction just to line pockets, right? So not only were the taxes on cigarettes very high, because they're like, well, these people are addicted. We know they can't quit. So we're just going to charge an exorbitant price to line our pockets. That's what happened.
And do you know the reasons why they claim these tax increases?
No.
It's hilarious because they're like, well, we're trying to stop people from smoking. So if we raise the price in taxes.
The guys that they use?
Huh?
That's the ruse. That's the guys, the ruse that they use to trick people into charging them more money because they're addicted.
Essentially, yeah. So they're saying that we're going to try to stop more people from smoking because if it's going to cost more, then they're going to think twice about smoking.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, they're addicted. Nobody wants to smoke. No. Yeah. So, well, that was the first problem, and the fact that people just let it happen. Taxes. I understand what taxes are for. They pay for the police, the firemen. There's a lot of great benefits to taxes. I'm all for them, but they need to be reasonable and they need to be non-exploitive. And
well, not only that, they also need to make sure to be a lot more transparent.
Yeah.
And that's the huge thing because I'm not a fan of a lot of taxes.
Yeah.
And we live in New York State, which is
right.
Well, a heavily taxed state.
Yeah.
But there's zero accountability on where this money is being spent.
Right.
And when you spend money on I love New York signs that are posted throughout the state, which are not DOT legal on a federal level.
Right.
And you spent millions of dollars on these signs. And then all of a sudden, the federal government steps in and says, you can't have those signs because they're not compliant with what needs to be. And you need to take them down. And then they say, are going to have to spend money to take them down, and then they become a waste. And then they're like, you know what? Fuck it. We're not going to do it.
Yeah.
So then do they lose money federally from fixing things or, for the roads and all that? And then they fuck up signs on purpose, like the Tappan Zee Bridge. They just replaced it with the dumbass Cuomo Bridge, which is his greatest achievement because he named it after his father.
Or help programs for people who are addicted, help medical services, help homeless people, or buy art for the art museum. We definitely need art for the art museum. Like, it's the people who are making the decisions. That's a whole other problem. And the amount that you're being taxed is a whole nother problem. But
and then new license plates.
Oh, sure. The taxes on cigarettes is by far probably one of the most blatant taking advantage of just the addicts to get more money, which is, and I've always said there should be like a base tax. You should get like 10% of my work you can have for taxes. 10% sounds reasonable to me, and it should be across the board. And then you get that amount and figure out then we all should have a say in what the best way to spend that money. But that's a whole nother thing. It's a very complicated system. I understand that. But the blatant taxing on cigarettes was the one thing. So then the vaping came out. And first, it's not nicotine. Or it's not tar from cigarettes, right? Cigarettes, there's a million different chemicals. Yeah. There's nicotine in both, but also there's the tar
Varying
you don't get in your
degrees.
lungs. Yeah. So when I switched over to the vaping, it took me a couple years to get everything right to where I got the right nicotine level and everything worked for me. But once I got it working for me, it's way better than smoking because my lungs were not as clogged with tar and everything. We don't know what the long-term benefits of vaping are, but I can tell you personally that using the vape is better than smoking. You don't get the lung clogging, you don't stink, you're not, and again, the money for taxes, right? So I vaped for about 4 or 5 years at least, without smoking, which is great. And then I got to the point in my life where I just think that it's a stupid habit in the first place, and I was able to conquer my own addiction to where I quit vaping, right? So I went to the dentist. The dentist said, asked me, do you use tobacco products? And I said, no, I haven't smoked in 5 years, and I just quit vaping about 6 months ago. But before I said I quit vaping, she said, oh, was that because people are dying from vaping?
Oh, geez.
And it's been, what the problem is, it's been all over the news. If you watch the news article, Vaping Epidemic, quit vaping, right? Well, they're not telling the truth about what's really happening. What's really happening with the people who have suffered casualty from vaping, they were buying street chemicals that were not from a vape shop or not approved substances that would normally go into a vape. They were buying street chemicals, and from what I've heard so far, it was from THC, not even tobacco products. It was THC vape juice that was off the street in a black market.
In a black market where it's actually illegal.
Right, exactly.
And
and that's what's tainted things. So really, it's another chemical in the vape that is causing these people to become sick and die, which they are investigating, and they're going to find those people. Now, do you remember when the Dominican Republic had the tainted alcohol problem, where people were dying from alcohol? Where nobody was on the news. They didn't have anything on the news saying, don't drink alcohol, everyone's dying from drinking alcohol. But when
they kind of were, though.
Well,
there was a lot of people.
They said the Dominican Republic people were dying, and don't be careful what you drink at the resorts. But they weren't telling people not to drink Bud Light.
No, they were talking about liquor, but that's the whole thing. They were actually saying don't do the liquor because that's where it was the problem, because it was tainted liquor.
Right.
But a lot of people, but it still did a lot of damage because people were freaking out because, oh my God, there's more deaths, and that's what it is.
I didn't hear anyone freaking out not to drink liquor because people were dying in the Dominican Republic.
People were saying don't go to the DR because of that particular reason.
For the Dominican Republic, but my friends, I never heard any friends at the bar saying, don't drink liquor, we're all going to die. But that's what's happening with vaping.
That was also limited to a certain spot.
Right.
So if you were at, here, these vaping illnesses are widespread throughout the states. It's not in just one localized spot.
It was a couple states because it was there's a whole article, and they're still trying to, I'm sure the details will come out. But when you hear the news tell it, they just make it sound like if you vape at all, you're going to die, which is what my dentist, the hygienist, thought. And she's like, oh, good, because people are dying. And I'm like, it's fake news. It's propaganda. It's not real. They're not saying people are dying from tainted vape juice. They make it sound like anyone who bought a vape is going to die. That's the
whole point of clickbait.
Exactly.
So I sent you this meme.
Okay.
And I'm sure you got it. I sent you this the other day, right? You remember it?
I probably have to look for it. Yeah.
All right. So for anybody who's not paying attention, it's what the hell is that dude's name? The character?
Squidward?
Yeah, Squidward. So Squidward's got his eyes closed in 2 of the 3 things, and then it's open up, and it's like, oh my God. And so it says opiate crisis.
This is great.
70,000 deaths per year.
Yeah, and I think that's actually low.
Not even batting an eye.
Yeah.
Smoking. Just smoking cigarettes.
Yeah.
480,000 deaths per year.
Yeah.
Not even batting an eye.
Yeah.
Flavored vaping. 6 deaths. And everybody's freaking out.
Right.
And his eyes are crazy.
Right. And also, I will interject that this is wrong. Flavored vaping is not what killed these people. What killed these people was tainted THC, allegedly right now. The closest evidence is black market homemade street juice that was THC. It wasn't even for nicotine. So, but then when you hear all these repeated things on the news that say vaping's killing, they're lying. It's blatant lies, right? And I saw it on all the news channels. So now,
what did the governor do?
Exactly.
Of New York,
right?
Just today,
right? So they're banning flavored vaping, right? So now anyone who owns a vape shop is not going to be able to sell any kind of flavors. Now, already when I was going to buy these vape juices, most of these shops are 100% compliant. When you go in there, you have to give them your driver's license. They make sure that it's you. They run it through a thing, so you're on a list, I'm sure.
Well, it's to verify it's real.
Yeah. They don't let anyone in the shop who's under 18. I think it might even be 21 now. Who knows? But most of them, when you go into these vape shops, they don't let you in there. So then they'll go on TV. Now, there's always shady bodegas and shady areas who are going to sell to kids. It's been happening with cigarettes for years. It happens with alcohol.
Not only that though. It's other people can buy for them.
That too. Yeah.
And
so you're never going to stop.
You're never really going to stop it.
No, you can't. And it's been like that since the dawn of time.
Well.
I've tried to buy
illegal in terms of putting an age restriction on it. I mean, you go into like other parts of the world where there's not really this big deal about drinking before the age of 21.
Right.
Like you go into certain European countries and, kids, young children, not young children, but, 12, 13, they may have a glass of wine at dinner and they don't there's not this big stigma. Oh, you can't drink. And then all of a sudden you can drink and like nobody knows how to comprehend that. And so it brings a question or it questions everything saying, is it really safer saying you can't drink until 21? Or is it, if you're around it already, you're going to have a little bit different of opinion?
So now this whole death thing has fueled, and they keep saying it's to protect children. It's to protect children. Well, I don't have children. And why are you taking away my right to be able to do something as a free American because someone else has children and is trying to protect their children? It's their responsibility as a parent, if you ask me.
Oh, absolutely.
To do their
100%.
best to sit down with their kids, talk to them about the dangers of drinking and smoking and drugs and vaping, and keep an eye on them and make sure that they don't, and to eliminate children vaping. It is a huge problem. I agree. But also, you can't tell me I can't do it because someone else has children. That's not freedom.
And you know what this is? This so that the governor, he just executive actioned saying banning all flavored vape juice. This is such a gross overstep of power that in an overreaction, an emotional overreaction, and it's just like the 198 when. That you remember when it went from 50 to 30 like that?
Oh, yeah.
Because there was a driver.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we're in Buffalo.
Tell the story while I go up.
Okay.
So check the air in my tires.
So we live in Buffalo, which is Western New York. And what that is, there's highways and there's expressways and there's all this, and there's the 198, which is a expressway that goes from the 190 to the 33, which is kind of like an extension between cutting through North Buffalo, going into kind of like the central area of Buffalo, not downtown but close to it, where it's more central of Buffalo. So there's this 198 stretch, and part of it goes along a park, which is called Delaware Park. And so you have this road that's 50 mile an hour, and you have a park, and there's a walkway, and maybe about 20, 30 feet or so from the street to this walkway. There's a grassy medium in between. You can't drive over on the park because it's a walkway. So it's a good amount of space, but there was no median guardrail or anything of the sorts. There was just this little tiny wooden nothingness that was there. It was not a guardrail in any way, shape, or form. So there's one guy driving down the street, going, the speed limit, whatever it might be. Actually, I think it might have even been a little bit less, but it doesn't really matter. He ended up falling asleep at the wheel because it was, he was too tired to drive, and he was driving and he fell asleep behind the wheel. Very tragic story. And he hit and killed a child who was walking in the parkway. And yes, it's a very, very, very sad story of what had happened. But it was then the governor of New York decided to change the expressway from 50 miles an hour down to 30 miles an hour and expect everybody to follow this right off the bat. And it was literally changed within 36 hours of that tragedy happening. It was such an overreach, an emotional overreach, that, if they would have actually had a real guardrail there, the car would have actually hit the guardrail and that person would have never been hit. So it was a problem on their end to begin with, or Buffalo's problem, or whatever it might have been. So now if you travel this expressway, well, quote unquote expressway, because it's only 30 miles an hour, they put up this this reinforced real wooden guardrail to stop people from hitting it and going over. But it doesn't take into account the fact that that's still supposed to be an expressway. So you have all of these things. So they dropped it down to 30. Now there's a big push for it to go back to 55. Well, up to 55 because it was originally 50.
Well, it's causing danger by slowing those people down going through there. And we all knew that as soon as that happened, I forget what the circumstances are, but it wasn't just a normal driver who I remember what, but we all knew.
He fell asleep.
Yeah. It was like, up too long or drunken driving or something.
It was, he fell asleep. So he fell asleep because there was no guardrail there. Yeah. It was just a shitty little guardrail, because the people there are like, oh no, we need to see the park and nobody wants to see the guardrail. So we need to make sure that we keep it as clean as possible. But it still had a good chunk of dirt in between the walkway and the road itself. Yeah.
Well, it's a horrible fluke accident.
Yeah, he fell asleep. And unfortunately, there was somebody right there. Right. So it was a very unfortunate story.
Yeah. So build up the thing. We all knew that as soon as they move that down, like, okay, they'll keep it that way for a couple years and then they'll move it back up. But it's the same thing. So with the vaping, I forgot to mention this. Now NBC or CBS has an article about how people are going. They say people are going back to smoking now to stop their nicotine addiction from vaping, right? So you read the article and they find one kid who's 21 years old. And when you see his picture of him, he's got his little bandana on and his ripped jeans. And he says that he had to go back to smoking regular cigarettes because of the nicotine content in his vape. I'm like, okay, well, get a lower nicotine content in your vape then.
Well, not only that, why wouldn't you use something like the gum or the patch or cold turkey and quit? Because let's go 6 deaths from flavored vape.
Nope. Incorrect. 6 deaths from THC black market juice.
It's
Let's
whatever.
be accurate.
I mean, here or there, it doesn't really matter.
It does. It's important.
No, it doesn't, because it's just 6 deaths, period. When you go and say, oh, I need to go back to smoking, which says 480,000 per year.
Yeah.
On that meme.
Yeah.
So
who knows where those numbers come from, but either way, so they find one kid. They find one 20-year-old kid, 21-year-old kid, and then that's the poster boy for people going back to smoking, which is not the case. And they're not highlighting the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people who have successfully quit smoking using these things.
That's what they should actually have done.
But the more important issue to me is that taking away people's adults' rights. Mm-hmm. That's all it is. I don't know how we got into... we're supposed to live in a free country. They keep saying, it's a free country. But everywhere I turn, someone is telling me what I can't do. Now I can't get an enjoyable flavor of vape cigarette to help me quit smoking, it is better than smoking. I don't care what anyone says. It's better. I'm a perfect example of it. But even if I want to smoke, it's the most horrible thing ever. Mm-hmm. It's me. I don't know how someone else can tell me that I can't do this thing because of whatever the dangers may be. Well, good. Then don't do it yourself. If you don't like it, don't do it.
Yeah. And then educate the people around you, like your children, what smoking does, what like the causes, the issues, the problems, and all that,
Right.
and be a responsible parent instead of thinking that the government has to do everything.
Right.
Like that's one of the biggest questions I have. Why do we think that the government has to step in and control
Right.
every little aspect? So, I mean, you said earlier too, like how government has stepped in and says that you can't do, and everywhere you go, they tell you what you can and can't do.
Mm-hmm.
But think of security. Like think of the security that you have just walking around, like the security systems that track you, that you where you're going, the license plate readers that know where you're going, the ID badges. I mean, during the Cold War, why were we fighting in the Cold War? Why were we at odds with socialist Russia? Do you know why?
Well, because of the exact thing that's happening right now. It's because it's not freedom.
Yeah, because, well, the big thing was socialism.
It was communism.
Or communism. But it's like, why? Yeah, you're right, communism. But why? Like, they're all doing these things, but we are promoting freedom.
Right.
And yet, Russia would have, like, and if Russia would have been how we are today, how the U.S. is today, in terms of security and oversight and regulation, they would have been like kicked out because they were wishing for what we have today. And we were like, no, it's all about freedom. So how the hell did it go from that to everything is watched, everything is controlled, everything, like they know your decisions, and if you go off path, it could flag a system and say, watch this person, see what they're doing. Is this acceptable or not? Or is this in the normal?
To me, and who judges what's acceptable? So here's the other thing that's hilarious about this vaping thing. So we have the governor of New York, and we have other people involved in this. But here's the funniest thing about it. Again, we don't have healthcare that is affordable for anybody, right? Unless you're rich. We don't have proper healthcare. We have a huge banking problem. We have huge Wall Street problem. We have a huge housing crisis. We have huge mental health epidemic. There's so many problems. We have crumbling infrastructure. Everything is going to shit.
Let's focus on vape
these
pens
goddamn
and the bullshit
flavored vapes.
Exactly.
You know what's funny about it? Today, when I was at getting my hamburger, I told you I was going to come here after my hamburger. I went outside, and as I was leaving, there was a guy smoking a cigar. And I just thought to myself, like, I cannot imagine going up to that guy and saying, sir, I don't agree with you smoking a cigar because of your health. You can't smoke that cigar, or for whatever. It's an instant reaction in these people's heads. Like, oh, that guy's doing something.
And that's the whole problem. People are actually expecting and doing that.
Yeah.
Like,
they have a control issue.
Is it actually affecting you in any way, shape, or form? I mean, they already have. I mean, I can understand you can't smoke in a building because it does. The secondhand smoke is affecting other people around you. 100%. But if it's not affecting somebody around you, get the fuck out of here. I'll do what I want. And so I completely understand. Same things with smoking in a car with children, because, you know, they're growing.
Completely understand
that, because again, it's not just affecting you, it's affecting the people around you. So when it affects people around you, yes, I can understand certain regulations, but when it comes to people actually saying, no, you can't do it because it's bad, and the kids might
I don't even think they think about it. They just see someone else doing something, and they're like, oh, that person's doing something. Oh my God, they're doing something that I'm not doing. That's what the problem is. And I think it's fear of missing out too. And also, me being an adult, I never vaped around other people that were either my nephews or underage. I was always consciously aware of it. And I know a lot of people aren't like that. They're just vaping away. But I at least was aware of that. And because I don't want to be part of the problem. And I understand that adults are influences on younger people. So to me, you need to be a leader. If I had an addiction to vaping, it was horrible. I've kicked it. But even when I had that addiction, I was consciously aware of if there were other kids who are under the age of 18, I would not vape around them. Right. So I was something I did by myself, you know, in the confines of my own area or on my break from work but that's why you cannot tell me that I can't do that now. It's really bothering me. I don't.
It's so messed up, and we live in this hypersensitive world that like everybody has to be like this perfect form, and it's like,
But what does
what
that
the
mean?
fuck does that even mean? Exactly, like what is the point? You can't say that, like, and just because you don't agree with something that I like or do does not give you a right to say I can't do that in any way, shape, or form. You know, you and I have differences of opinions on quite a few issues and topics and things, but yet you and I can still talk it out. And at the end of the day, we're still friends, and you know, we still can continue our friendship and all that good stuff. And it's like, what the fuck is wrong with people?
Well, the funniest thing to me is once they banned smoking in bars, it's not like that in every state. So people are in states where I went to Pennsylvania. I don't know if you can still smoke in bars there, but about 10 years ago, you still could. I remember going out with a friend of mine that was an old friend. We go into the bar, like, this is the craziest thing. I can smoke in here. Like, I just thought, like, whoa. But I did get it from not being a smoker. When you go in there, it stinks in there. And if you're a non-smoker, why would you want to go into a bar and it stinks? And I get it. But the funniest thing is in today's climate, I can't believe people are going, you're discriminating against me as a smoker. You've got to make an area for me, a smoker, where I can go. And you can't discriminate against me because I'm a smoker.
And it's called outside, where you should go and not affect other people.
But we're so, like, everyone's so screaming discrimination, and you have to use my pronouns, and you address me as the attack helicopter that I am. I can't believe that the smokers were like, well, wait a minute. You can't tell me I have to go outside and be in the cold to smoke. That's discrimination. You stand out in the cold. You have to make a special space for me where I can go and smoke. That's what I thought was going to happen. I thought restaurants and bars were going to have their own area, like at the airport. They used to have smoking rooms at the airport. Yeah, where I could go. And you can't discriminate against me because I'm a smoker. But that didn't happen. I'm like, oh, this is the craziest thing.
No, you know what their biggest push is going to be? That they're going to say it's a addiction, so we suffer from an illness. And then they're going to be like, well, now we need ADA compliance. So now, because like ADA has, you have to have so many like handicap spots, and you have to have doors that are so wide, and you have to have handicap stalls, and you have to have all this stuff that makes you ADA compliant. Now you have, because we have an addiction and it's an illness, you have to provide an enclosed room. But you know what? I don't like sitting in the enclosed room, so I'm going to sit out here in the middle of the restaurant or the bar, and I'm going to smoke because it's a mental illness, and you are not a mental. It's an illness, and it's an addiction. So you need to abide by the fact, and you can't discriminate against me because of the ADA, and then you wouldn't be you'd be in accordance.
That's really what I thought was going to happen. I thought the smokers were like, you can't discriminate against us because we smoke. Who are you?
No, because you know what? All of this action happened earlier.
Yeah.
And it was before all this hypersensitivity that happened, crap. Because there's so many places that have banned smoking places.
I'd be outside like this smoking my cigarette, freezing to death. It's a horrible addiction. You know what's interesting to me is that you shouldn't be able to exploit people's addictions. First of all, you can't say
for financial gain.
Yeah, like we're going to tax you ridiculous amounts, way more than anything else is taxed because you have an addiction.
And you shouldn't change taxpayers you shouldn't change or reclassify people from employee or independent contractors to employees to gain tax revenue. If you really want to make a bigger difference for the smoker, you provide services to help them quit. You know, I would be all for giving them things like patches or gum or anything like that, or education to help them quit instead of trying to use their addiction to gain more tax revenue.
Got it.
And same thing with AB5, because that's fucking bullshit all across the board, because you're not looking out for the right people. You're fucking people over trying to collect more money.
Yeah. Stop fucking people over.
So that's a big problem.
For sure. Yep. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to talk about too today is like wagging the dog.
Okay.
Wag dog theory.
Yep.
So for anybody who doesn't know what wag the dog is.
Ready? The term, because I didn't know what it was.
Okay.
I only recalled the movie, and I never saw the movie. So I'm like, well, what does that mean? So I
was
looked it
going
up.
to give a brief synopsis on the movie, but go
Okay,
ahead.
well, you do
Explain
the
it.
movie. I'll do the definition.
Yeah.
So the term, the tail wagging the dog, is when a smaller part of something runs the larger part of it. I had to look it up.
Yep.
So according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, the tail wagging the dog definition used to describe a situation in which an important or powerful person or organization is running the entire part of the organization. Let me look at it better. I'm not fully prepared. But go ahead about
all right. Yeah, let me give you the movie and what, like, a brief synopsis of this. So the movie is, I don't know, 20 something years old or so. It's 20 plus years, I know for sure. But the brief synopsis of it is, okay, so the president was caught up in a thing that made him look bad. And you know, we all know bad press, at least in the 90s, would have cost a president his term, and he would have been impeached, kind of like what happened with Bill Clinton. So this was kind of like the thing behind it. So the president was caught up in this controversy that would have, and I believe it was with a woman. I haven't seen the movie in a little bit of time, but I believe it was something with a woman where maybe he was having like an extramarital affair or whatever it was. Whatever. He was going to be caught in a controversy. So what ended up happening was they're like, well, let's throw a fake news story out there to sway people and to move them away from this little controversy so they won't pay attention to it. And then we'll spin it so it makes you look like this hero, and they'll forget all about that completely. So they came up with this crisis in, I think it was in Europe or something, but it was in a different country, and they were saying that like there was this war happening and there was unstableness and they needed all this stuff. So they put it out into the media, and the media ate it up, and this country came out and was like, nothing's going on. We don't even know what you're talking about. Like, where is this? And they downplayed that completely and said, oh no, there's this crisis and all this crap. And then there was this, like, it was on the brink of this mass issue. And then they came in and swooped in and said, oh, everything's going to be okay now. So it was like this huge buildup of something to take away from this controversy that was going to be made public and made him look like he was this hero, when in fact they made up the whole thing to sway the American public so he could go for re-election or he could continue being president and all this crazy stuff. So that's essentially what it is. And so the reason why I wanted to bring that up, did you need to say like...
Well, so the tail wagging the dog is used to describe a situation in which an important or powerful person, organization, etc., is being controlled by someone or something that is much less important or powerful. So we're talking about when someone who doesn't have any power or is a very small influential impact is controlling a large aspect of something, using whatever, blackmail or whatever. But to what you're saying, where we're putting out fake stories, not to get off topic, but honestly, with this whole
that's the whole point.
Well,
I wanted to go on what the fake stories were, so then we can talk about how it's swaying opinion, but also, you know, like how many times there's a story that is coming out, and then just like that, nobody cares about that story anymore. Right. They're on this next one, which is like something completely off topic or whatever it is. And like Facebook used that for a lot of the things. So I don't know. I mean, when was the last time you had Facebook? You haven't had it for a little while.
A long time, like 3 or 5 years, maybe 4 or 5 years.
So you were still in that position where, you know, if they changed certain things, everybody freaked out and everybody said, no, you can't change it. Like when they changed from, it was more your wall and all this stuff that you could put on it to this news feed, and they switched over and they changed all the look of everything. And each time everybody freaked the fuck out when they decided to make changes. Then all of a sudden, with like clockwork, about a couple of days later, there would be this new thing that would be going around where everybody would say, oh, Facebook is going to start charging you a monthly fee.
Yeah.
And then everybody was getting all up in arms. No, you can't charge me. It's got to stay free.
Yeah.
And then they come out and say,
completely
no, it's
forgot about the
been
redesign.
free. It's always
Yeah.
going to be free. We're not going to charge people. And just like that, everybody forgot about the change. And then it did this a couple of times. And Facebook really hasn't changed too much in terms of like the news feed and all this. It's been pretty, it's been pretty constant that way. So it hasn't been this, but yeah, when they changed the wall and they changed the layout and then they changed to the news feed, you had all this stuff happening.
Right.
And then every single time they put out this fake thing that says, oh yeah, we're going to start charging people. And then they just came out and said, no, we're not going to charge anybody. We never have and we never will.
Yeah.
And
I remember that.
Yeah.
Well, to me, so to go back to the vaping thing, I'm not a conspiracy guy. I understand that conspiracies do happen. But I'm not one of these.
What about Epstein?
Yeah, well, so that's a whole nother
But
thing.
I'm just, go with the
So,
Viper.
well, I understand, but normally it's always either stupidity, human stupidity, or corruption or something. But rarely is there actually a massive conspiracy, which there are examples. But when this whole vaping thing came out, and I keep seeing all of these articles that are misrepresenting the situation of what's really happening, and then once you actually look into what's really happening, I kept thinking, like, okay, is someone doing this on purpose? Like, are they putting these chemicals in these vapes to push their agenda? Because that happens. Like, is there a real conspiracy going on here? But then the bigger picture is everyone's so focused on these vaping and talking about it. People at my work are like, oh my God, I can't vape because they're killing people. Like, well, no, there's black market. Are you buying black market juice that's full of THC? No, you're not. Okay, well then you're fine. Go use your vape, right? That's the first thing. But the other thing is people are so distracted by it that we're missing, again, all of the important issues: healthcare, housing.
No, not
banking.
only that, but here's the real question: what are people, or what was the issue that was kind of going on before that? Because the thing is, you always got to look and see what was going on before. What was everybody talking about? And then all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, there's these...
Well, it was Epstein, wasn't it?
I mean, it could have been. I mean, there's a lot of things that are going on, so it's really dependent. And then they're like, oh my God, there's people who are in the hospital because of, they're getting sick from this, they don't know what it is. It's this vape epidemic that's starting to happen. We don't know. And then all of a sudden, then they have, somebody dies and they're like, oh my God, the first death from vape. And then it was a second and then third, and it's like, but I mean, every death is a tragedy, obviously. And if it could have been prevented, then that's great. That would have been awesome. If we would be smart and look at the reality of the situation.
Right.
But
So what you're saying is if marijuana was legal and people didn't have to buy black market THC to vape, they wouldn't be dying, is what you're saying?
No. I'm actually getting beyond that situation. I'm not even looking at the vape itself. Yeah. I'm talking about if we could stop, because we're focusing on the stupidest things. Because, I mean, yes, it's a tragedy when somebody dies. And 6 people have died from this tainted vape juice. Yep. But again, you look at how many deaths there are because of smoking cigarettes. And then you look at how many deaths there are because of people who are drinking and driving. How many deaths there are because of distracted driving. How many deaths there are because of opiate overdoses. How many deaths there are because of this. How many deaths there are because of that. How many this, that. Right. And continue how many people are dying. How many people are dying because they can't get access to the proper health care that they need. How many people are dying because of stress overload because they can't collect enough money and they're working 3 fucking jobs. Yep. And now they discovered Uber and Lyft and they can't fucking get a job, or they're worried about employment because, hey, I already had 2 jobs and this one was great because I could go on and offline when I needed to. If I needed to take time off, I can. I don't need to worry about changing my schedule and all this. And yet there's all of these problems that we don't focus in on. And 1 million deaths here, 600,000 deaths here, 37,000 deaths here. Yeah. And nobody bats an eye because it's just normal. Yeah. It's just fucking normal. And then all of a sudden, 6 people die because of tainted flavor, because of tainted vape juice, and they're not even reporting the real fucking facts, which is an absolute bullshit thing. Total bullshit. Altogether.
And you know what else is hilarious about it? Along that line of thinking, like, okay, well, we have to protect the children. We're gonna ban these vapes or whatever it is, right? Well, in that line of thinking, well, guess what? Your kid cannot play any sports. No sports. They're not allowed to skateboard. They're not allowed to play football. They're not allowed to play any sports.
Think of all these problems.
We can't get them injured.
Think of all these problems that people have when they're playing sports to begin with. You know, if just the simple jostling around could cause traumatic brain injuries and get CTE, and we just don't know because it's the little hits that add up over time, and you don't really know what the issues are. But the big hits we thought were the major concern. So let's make the game a little bit safer.
Yeah.
So let's put these giant head guards on NFL players so we can hit harder because we can. But yet you can arguably say that football was safer when they were wearing those little leather helmets that didn't protect them really at all because people weren't hitting as hard.
To be more careful, for sure.
So, it's this whole freaking thing that people really need to like start paying attention to, but it's like this drip feed thing.
Yeah.
So like, you drip feed them just a little bit a little bit over time. And then all of a sudden what it used to be and what it is now are completely different. Right. So you look, like I brought up with security, back in the 50s, during the height of the Cold War, the 60s, 70s, and 80s, during the height, they were saying, don't you want to live in a free state where ask what not you, or what was JFK's famous quote?
Ask not what you can do, or
what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country.
country.
And now it's like, free stuff. Yeah. And then like, you look at how it was in the Cold War. Russia was, they were communist and they were controlling everything. But you go to today, and the U.S. government is even more in tune with what you're doing and more regulations and more control. And you really think you have control? It's really not.
Well, it depends on what it is. So that's what's ridiculous about it. Like, they're not regulating things that need to be regulated. There has to be some kind of universal rules that protect people, because if you don't protect people, then what's happening in society today happens even worse. It's exactly what the problem with communism is. The problem with communism is not that it's not a bad idea. It's that once certain people decide, okay, I'm in charge of dispersing all of the money. Well, guess what? I'm keeping all the money. That's what happens in communism.
Because it's
the higher ups people starve the poor people, and they don't disperse things properly or evenly. The idea of communism is everybody gets a little bit. But, and we all prosper, which is a great in theory, but that's not what happens in real life. In real life, only the higher up people can have sugar. And then the rest of the people are waiting in the bread line and starving, right? And only that's what happens. It's not a bad theory, but in reality, it's not true communism. And that's what the problem was in Russia, is like all of the higher ups were benefiting, but that's what's happening here in our country under capitalism. It's like,
it's like you got to figure out where things are going to work.
But you can never take human greed out of humans unless you are conscious of it, right?
No, but that's the whole thing. You got to say, okay, well, what's going to work and what's not? What needs to be on a social platform? What needs to be on a free market platform?
Exactly.
And then there needs to be, it needs to take outliers or outlying situations and control it there. Kind of like when you go bowling and you have like children have bumpers.
Yeah.
So you can go down the entire lane, and only on the outlier where the gutter lays is where you need to block and you can put in regulation, but everywhere else is free roam, free territory. I don't need a fucking license to go fishing and hunting. There's no reason, but I understand part of its process too.
I get it.
They're trying to make sure that there's wildlife is kept, and there's not overkilling in populations.
I get the need
and things
for
like that. I understand that aspect, but I don't need to get a license and pay a fee to be able to do that and show my, show my ID to be able to do that. I'm a free American. I can pick and choose where I want. And then I don't need the security. I don't need all these cameras tracking where I'm going, what I'm doing, when I'm doing it, and trying to make my choices for me, because that's what it does. Like, I scroll through Facebook and, a lot of people get outraged. So they're like, all right, well, let's look at what's going on there and how we can outrage you and keep you going longer because people interact that way. Now, the algorithm maybe didn't know that, but it works because that's what keeps people on longer. So is it an echo chamber where people are getting furious with each other because that's what's going on? And then, you go to the media and they're losing money because, a couple of people can sit around and talk and get more views or more viewership, or somebody in their kitchen on a laptop can get more views than the news and actually reporting real unbiased when the news media outlet might be biased in a certain position in a certain way, which has been magnified in the last couple of years, especially. And they can't say that they're not because, it's clear evident no matter how you look at it. And there's all of these different things, but they're chipping away here and they're chipping away there. And let's look at the security issue. So with all the cameras and Big Brother watching you and recording everything you're doing, like I said, it's the drip feeder. So where did the security system start? They started like in the banks and that. And it's like, oh yeah, the banks. Yeah. And we need it there because, somebody could rob a bank. So we need it there for our safety. And then they're like, well, let's put it in the courthouses and the police stations and the government offices. So everybody's safe when they go there. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, let's put it in the parks because, somebody could get raped in the park. Right. And something could happen. A child could get abducted, and we need to make sure that we can see what's happening. So if we need to find them, we can. And it's like, whoa, how did we go from being free and fighting for freedom, especially in the Cold War, 50, 60 years later, not even in some points because the USSR ended in 1988 or early 90s, right?
I
don't even remember. The Berlin Wall came down in 88, right?
I'd have to look.
That's where I'm thinking. I don't remember. Dates are confusing with me right now.
Too, yeah.
But when Russia fell and turned into what it is, and socialism fell, and the Cold War was pretty much over, at that point, then, that was 25 years ago. That's not that long, but security cameras and that were already starting to make its way in here. And then all of a sudden you have like 2011 where now you have this giant, or 2001, I'm sorry, September 11th, 2001, where you have this huge transition from, freedom to safety and the cost benefit between both of them. And everybody's like, oh, we can't have this happen again. And we need to make sure that we can have security and we have safety and public safety. So if you ever hear public safety, if you ever hear we need to look out for the children or the safety of the children, or they're going to chip away at your freedom as a person, as an individual, as an American.
For sure. And that's what's happening. And it's also, like parents, a lot of people, let's face it, a lot of kids who are vaping, they're vaping because their parents smoke or vape. That's how I picked up smoking. I picked up smoking not because when I was a teenager, it was right towards the end of where they're having a lot of cigarette ads, and there were cigarettes at movies, and they make it look cool, and
well, that's the same thing with that's the same thing though with vaping today. It makes it look cool because here's the thing.
They don't have commercials on TV with some guy with sunglasses vaping.
They don't. But here's the thing. It's not that. It doesn't matter what's on TV anymore because we've entered a whole new era for the people. For just people in general, because we have things like Facebook and we have things like the internet and we have all these different Snapchat and all this stuff. And then, so it's a much more social world. Everybody's talking to everybody in this, but it's the cool thing because it looks cool because I can go get a cherry flavored and I'm not really smoking cigarettes. So I can puff on this and then get this big giant puff cloud.
Yeah, that's not so
smoke.
For me, when I grew up as a teenager, it wasn't the commercials on TV or anything like that. And they did have, when I was a teenager, I think it was right towards the end of where tobacco was stopping marketing towards the young generation, right? Because they did crack on it and crack down on it, and rightfully so. But what got me smoking was my parents smoked, and then I got peer pressured into it from from my siblings who were smoking because our parents smoked. So These people,
and that's the same thing with vaping today, is the fact
same
that they're
thing.
getting, it's the peer pressure though that's more,
it's the peer
and it's
pressure,
attractive.
and, oh, mommy and daddy do it, so, and all my friends are doing it. It's not, these flavors. It's their monkey see, monkey do, right? So the only way to eliminate that is, one, parents have to be responsible. They should probably quit smoking, but if they don't, be more conscious about smoking around your children. Don't let your children know that you even vape if you're going to vape. But be
smoke
or quit, and quit. They should quit. If you have a parent, quit. And you got to know. Then you can't. You got to know that your kid is going to mimic you.
Yeah, but here's the thing: you can also just not smoke in front of them or let them know that
help
you smoke.
mitigate it.
So, like, my grandfather used to smoke, and my mom and her brothers and sister, or like that family, like his kids, my grandfather's kids, my aunts, uncles, and my mom, they had no idea he smoked until I think my mom or my uncle found like a pack some way somehow,
right?
And it was just by sheer chance, and everybody's like, "What?"
Yeah.
And he's at that moment is when he quit too. Yeah. He's like, because he knew better. He knew, okay, I don't want them to see them doing it. I want them to understand that you don't do that, and you can completely cut it away from them where they don't even know. So it's kind of like the same thing with sex. Mm-hmm. You don't know, like, you're not going to know your parents are having sex because you're not going to watch them.
Right.
They're going to keep it away from you.
Right.
I mean, you could know. I mean, once you get older, you're going to know. You're going to be like, oh yeah, they do.
And the responsible thing as a parent, if you don't want your child taking that action, is to educate them and talk to them and be honest with them about it.
Exactly.
You can't pretend that people don't have sex and not teach them about, condoms, about STDs or anything. Because then guess what? They get pregnant and they get STDs because no one taught them anything. Same thing with smoking and drugs and anything else. You got to be a parent. You have to realize two things. One, you have to be the leading example. You lead by example, not by telling them, but by leading by example. And I think a lot of people aren't conscious of that, okay, I smoke and I drink and I do drugs. I got to tell my kid not to smoke or drink and do drugs.
Yeah. And
they don't realize that their kid are going to copy you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But I mean, you can also come back and say, look, I've made these mistakes and it's costing me, and it still does.
Yep.
I want something better for you.
Yep.
So you can say, look, I'm making the mistake. I've made the mistake. I'm still paying for it, and own it up.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing too is it seems like parents don't either know how to do it and step up and say no to your child. Like, they need to know what boundaries are.
For sure.
They are this person who is completely unmolded. Now, I understand, you don't want to put limits on your children because you want them to achieve greatness, and you want, but there's certain things they need to learn along the way where you need to say, look, you can't do that. You can't do that, because it could result in serious injury. It could result in death. It could result in all these things. So, like, if you see a child near the oven and says, no, don't touch that, it's hot pan. And then I mean, you can tell them that, but they're still going to touch it and then realize, oh, it's a hot pan. And then they burn themselves. So there's certain things that they need to do themselves to figure out, because one, they're going to test to see, oh, are you telling the truth or not, or what's going on? And then it's going to help shape. So, like, for my daughter, yes, I'll say no to her for certain things, or I'll be like, you don't do that. And she needs to, like, learn or understand, because she's just this unmolded child right now that just doesn't understand the world around her. But yet I've been around, and I don't want to put limits on her to where she can achieve whatever. I want to help embrace that. So it's not like, I'm not going to say, oh, you can't, like, make sure you go to school, go to college and get a good degree and go to school. No, I want you to be able to do whatever you want. So if you don't even want to go to school, but you've made decisions and you've thought about it and really, then I want to be able to support that. And that's the whole thing. Like, there's this whole thing. Like, I mean, people are coming in and saying, oh my God, I don't have any control over my child, or I don't have any control over this or that. I need somebody to step in and do this. And it's like, how
you're the parent.
Yeah, exactly. You're the parent. How do you, like, not have that?
Like, you were born, they were born with the control. So that's the funniest thing. And it seems like you are conscious that your child is aware more of your actions than what you tell them verbally. Like, they're watching you. What you do affects them. The decisions that you make affect them more than what you say to them.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of parents out there who just they have no awareness that their children are watching them, that they are the example for their children, then they're supposed to be providing a positive example.
Yeah.
I think that's what's happening with this vape is like, I don't want to deal with having to talk to my kid about not vaping. And I don't want to have to be diligent to make sure that they're not vaping and to educate them. I'm just going to say all adults can't vape either. Cause it's easier for me in my life to just ban vaping than having to have a conversation with my child. Like
I don't understand diligent. That. It makes no sense because what if the child, are parents like being lazy? Are they unsure? Are they too scared because they think that like Child Protective Services is going to come or something?
No,
I mean, it doesn't make any, I just don't understand like that whole aspect of it because, that's the whole thing. Yes, it's a full-time job. You have to be on your child because, again, they don't know anything how the world works. They don't understand anything. So yes, you want to keep their childlike sense of wonderment and awe of the world. I mean, that's how innovation can come about because the way they look at the world, they see so many different things. They're not bogged down by no.
Yeah.
But there's certain times when you have to say no to your child, but there's a lot of times when people do say no, that it's not the time you should say no. And you got to know the differences. And then you expect other people to raise your children for
that's
you.
The biggest thing.
You like school, like, I can't wait to get them into school because maybe the teacher will whip them into shape.
No.
And it's like, that's not how it works. You need to be there from day one. And you need to guide them with holding their hand.
You're the positive example. I was having a conversation with a friend of ours that we know, and she felt awkward talking to her child about sex when they're a teenager. And it's not awkward for the teenager if you just lay down the facts and you educate them in a proper way. Like, this is, unprotected sex. You could get STDs. Here's what the STDs are. Sex is not just about a penis going into a vagina. There can be emotions involved. Be prepared for this. And just having a legitimate conversation with them about the difference between love and sex, what intercourse is, how it works.
First off, too, if you make it weird, then they're going to think it's weird too. But if you keep it normal and it's normalized because, sex and relationships and love are part of life.
Yeah.
So am I going to hide the fact that I sleep with her mother?
Yeah, exactly.
Or am I going to hide the fact that you're not going to really hide that fact. You're just going to, it's going to be part of the normal conversation. So once she does get of age, when you have that conversation, it's not going to be weird. And again, if you think it's weird as a mother or father trying to have a conversation with your child about it and you act weird, they're going to pick up on that and they're going to feel uncomfortable and weird. And they're going to be like, oh my God, no, don't talk to me about that. I don't even want to know.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing. And I said, look, that's not your kid's that's your hang up. You're doing your kid a disservice by thinking that the school is going to educate them properly because you're too awkward to talk to your child. You have to get over that and just bite the bullet, act like an adult, be the leader, and educate your child.
Yeah, and not only that, why would you want to have your child educated what the school might say if you don't agree with that?
Right.
If you don't think that's what's going to the best way, why wouldn't you step in and say, look, this is what's going on, this is what happens, this is what I hope for you, this is what I'd like to see, I understand that might not happen, and I'm really not getting into specifics for a reason because everybody's going to be different.
Yeah.
But you need to be open and honest and truthful and say, look, you can watch the internet, but that's not really what sex is.
Exactly.
You see a dude coming on a chick's face and busting it right there, and you see the money shot, and that's not really what sex actually is. Right. And the problem is there's a lot of sex that, they try it. If you watch movies too, you see what it was like back in the 90s, the 2000s today. And it's like, holy fucking shit. Like there's so much out there. It's like, and then it keeps having to one up and one up and one up, because it's not, you can't just have straight sex anymore. It's got to be anal. It's got to be ass to mouth. It's got to be, fisting an asshole, and it's got to continuing going up. And it's like, that's not what sex actually is.
Right.
Like, nobody is actually really doing all that. I mean, you could, but that's what experimenting is. But you can say, look, I don't like that. That's not where I'm going. And the other person's got to respect that and all that shit. And it's
more important, and also like just what STDs are, how to put on a condom, like don't be awkward going into the store and buying prophylactics. Go to the doctor. Like I remember going to buy condoms and feeling so weird about it.
Oh, same here.
Like, wait a minute. Then I'm like, wait a minute. Like, I'm doing the right thing. Someone needs to tell you. It's not weird. You're making the smart choice. Definitely, good for you for getting condoms. Like,
and they're doing that negative connotation where it's like, oh, you can't have sex, and it's you're going to have sex, and that's the same thing. Like, I don't want to have this sex talk with my daughter. Fuck that. I want to shoot the person who's trying.
Of course.
But that's what the mother's for. That's what her mother's for and going to do. And it's like, well, you're going to reach a point in time where, you're going to want to have sex, and you're going to want to do this. And, you need to know what limits you want, because you are in control as well, too. You both are in control. But just remember, just because they're freeballing it in the movie on the internet, and they're freeballing it, doesn't mean that this person isn't taking birth control or doesn't have their tubes tied or doesn't have all these things. So don't try to fuck every single person you can. Yeah. Don't be irresponsible. Don't take the use protection or use this and that.
And you can only do so much. But one of the fortunate things about me is in school that I think that people did right was sex education for me. The little that I did learn in school, which we're all laughing and it's a freaking joke, but at least they tried to where it sparked my own curiosity. And because I like to learn, I learned on my own. But because of that, I'm like, I learned from other people's mistakes. Like, okay, people have AIDS, people have herpes and chlamydia and STDs, don't have unprotected sex. So I never did. Yeah, now I don't have any STDs, right?
And then the whole thing too is it's the scare tactics that they use when educating. Work. And it's like, and it's like the same thing with like DARE and a lot of these other programs. It's like, that's not how it works. Nope. Don't try and use fear mongering in order to get what you want.
I went to the library. Because it doesn't work.
Actually educate them and say, look, this is the reality of the situation. You need to make your own decisions, but just be prepared that if you do this, this is likely to occur and could happen. And if you continue to have unprotected sex with multiple people, multiple partners, then you could run the risk of
one person
contracting
because you
disease.
Don't know who that person has slept with. That person, you have sex with one. I have a friend who he has a daughter now because he had sex with the girl one time. Has a daughter. Mm-hmm. Other people, you don't know who they've been with. You could have sex one time, get some kind of STD because you don't know who they're with. Yeah. So like for me, I was always smart. I always used protection. And then if I was getting to a point in the relationship where it was time to not use protection, then we go to the doctor and get tested. Make sure you don't have AIDS. Make sure you don't have chlamydia or STDs. And I know a lot of people out there out fucking each other. When I was in my 20s, they all got STDs. I'm 39 years old. I've never got a girl pregnant, and I've never had an STD, and I'm proud of that.
I can say that I've never gotten an STD either, and my number is awfully high. And I'm just going to say that.
Right.
Well, I'm not going to get into specifics, but
the other thing is that people they're not, again, when it comes to education, if something should happen to you, they need to tell you what to be able to do. What are your options? And it's the same thing with drug overdoses. With drug overdoses, a lot of time people die because the people that they're with don't understand that you can take someone to the hospital, take them to the emergency room. They'll save that person's life and they're not going to get arrested. Yeah. But people die because they're afraid to go to the hospital and say, my friend's overdosing. They'll leave them outside or something, right? Mm-hmm. A relative of mine is dead because his friends did not take him to the hospital when he was overdosing. They're afraid of getting in trouble. But it's just like, if you don't want your baby anymore, you can take the baby to the fire station and just leave it there.
Yeah, to the
there's
safe
safe haven rules.
safe havens,
It's the same- I'm pretty sure it's the same thing with the hospitals. You take an overdosing person there, they're not going to arrest you. You're not going to get in trouble. You're going to save someone's life.
Yeah, and and that's the whole thing. Like, why? I don't understand why people think that they would be arrested for taking in the person who's doing the drugs or doing
exactly.
it. I mean, now if you're doing it too, that's one other thing.
Sure,
but they're probably going to
the hospital are not the police, and they're not there to arrest you. They're there to save lives, and it's the same thing telling someone who's, got an STD or got pregnant. What are their options? What can you do? Should you go? And they're not teaching you all this stuff. Mm-hmm. But it falls to the role of a parent.
Yep.
Teach your kids not to do drugs. You don't want them smoking. You don't want them drinking. If you catch them drinking or smoking, you need to know how to react doing that. Mm-hmm. And there's just so much these days. But telling other adults that they can't do something because you have a child.
We got to protect the children.
Yeah.
And that's, it's a major problem. So, I mean, that, we need to start taking responsibility for our own actions instead of making it seem like other people need to, do something in order for it to be okay or not okay, or police something. And it's like, that's not how it works. Just be smart, make the good decisions, live your life how you want. And you know what? How other people live their life is up to them.
Yep.
If they're happy doing something, or if they enjoy doing something that you don't agree with or you don't like, you know what? Hey, that's fine. There's still good people, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
Now, if they're trying to bring harm to another person or somebody else, or they are actually harm, then that's a different story.
And we have laws for that. We
and
already have laws in place for that.
Whole different, exactly.
It's crazy.
So, with that being said, I think we're pretty much ready to wrap this sucker up.
Yep.
Unless you had any last few things to say.
Freedom, freedom.
Yeah, let's blow an EMP and.
Let me look up the quote while you're doing your.
Why don't you talk into the microphone? Because I don't think I heard you. No, but are you checking your quote, Mr. Aaron?
Yep. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength.
Nice. It's like South Park. Nice. All right. With that being said, that is the end of the podcast.
I was Aaron.
You were, and I was Chris. Have a good night, everybody, or a good day, or whatever.